All right, guys, we're ready to get started. We're almost on time, which for Judy and I is absolutely amazing. If you watch Breakfast with Spaniels, you know, it's supposed to start at 8-ish. Sometimes it's 8:10. It's been 8:30 and 8:45 a time or two, and the weekends are they're just like that. But we absolutely appreciate everybody being here today. Who watches Breakfast with Spaniels? All right, quite a few of you. That's absolutely fantastic. Who has been to one of her seminars in the past? Okay, just a couple of you. So the rest of you have one heck of a treat in store for you today. One thing that I want to note, which I think is absolutely fabulous, is that some of you ladies allowed your husbands to come out. I talked about this at the last seminar. I'm always impressed when I see men in the audience, because that means that they've either gotten their chores done and were allowed a little trip out, you know, for the afternoon, or they've made a huge promise for dinner tonight, or something along those lines. So, gentlemen, welcome. Ladies, I hope you have a lot of questions. I think the format today is going to be sort of a question and answer sort of thing. We've got a couple of hours. I'm going to try to flag Dr. Judy at some point to talk a little bit about her products. We'll do that really towards the end and all. And then we can hang out for a while afterwards. So if for whatever reason you didn't get to ask a question, or it's one of those kinds of questions that you don't want to ask out loud, then we'll hang around and take care of a lot of that. My gosh, you can follow us to the campground. We're about 5 minutes away. We've got a big, nice campfire. You know, we'll do hot dogs, hamburgers, whatever.
Yeah, we're coming over for dinner today.
Exactly. We can make this an all-day event. But I think Tammy has a couple of things that she would like to sort of mention.
Mine was real quick. I just wanted to remind everybody, not only, you know, we're honored, obviously, to have Dr. Judy back. She's been with us at our other location as well, and did a phenomenal seminar. Everybody walked away with some really, really good information. But we also have October 10th is a meet and greet with Billy from Answers. He's going to be coming in, so it's going to be another Q&A. If you have questions about food and stuff, that's a good one to come into. October 13th, a lot of people don't know about this one really yet, even though a press release has been done. We're doing a canine crime seminar. It is going to be the owner's survival guide to the Pennsylvania laws, the new laws that are in place about tethering and hot cars and things like that. So make sure you try to come to that. That one's going to be a really, really good seminar as well. And then, of course, we have our Furry Fall Festival, October 20th. So you want to come to that. We're going to have a photographer doing pet photos. We're going to have games and contests and costume contests and things like that. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And then that's not up on the board yet, but December 1st is going to be our annual holiday photos with Santa. Okay, so that's going to be actually at the beginning of the month instead of at the end of the month, or more mid-month. So December 1st is going to be we're actually going to include it into our anniversary event, because it'll be 1 year since we've actually been in this location too. So we always have things going on, so make sure you stick with us, because, you know, we're always doing seminars. A lot of people that have been to a lot of our seminars know that we try to do this as much as we can. And we really appreciate when we can get people like Dr. Judy in, because plethora of knowledge, and you know, she'll get you with all the questions that you need answered. Okay? All right,
Fantastic.
Go to town.
That is absolutely excellent, and I will chime in with her October the 10th event. If you haven't been here to hear Billy from Answers, he's an absolute phenomenal wealth of information, and their product is absolutely so incredible. So, with that, guys, Dr. Judy.
Yay!
All right. So this is so cool to see a pet store like this. And we all need to support independent pet store owners rather than big box stores and online. Because these guys have the knowledge and can answer questions. When you walk into one of the big box pet stores, just try to get your questions answered about what would be the best food for your particular problem or for your particular animal. I've gone to bigger pet stores. When we opened our second clinic, there was a big pet store in town that was pretty bottom of the barrel. They were an independent pet store, but it was, you know, there was nothing in there that I considered to be, you know, good quality products for our pets. And so we went in and we did multiple seminars explaining the differences in the food and what to look for and how to educate people, and other people showed up for the talk and they did not change one thing that they were doing. And it was hard for us because our clinic has like this much retail space. So you've been there, you know, we have like this much retail space. So we don't even have our freezer with the food out front, so people don't even know that we have it. And that's in the smaller clinic. So we were really counting on this pet store, because we were like, well, we need to send people somewhere to shop, and wouldn't this be nice if we could have a little partnership? You'll send people to us, we'll send people to you. Yeah, that didn't work, because I'd send people down there, and they wouldn't have anything on our recommended list of food. So when you find people like this that have the knowledge, who stay up to date, who bring in speakers, I mean, Billy is phenomenal. If you want to talk to Billy, you talk to Billy. Hi, George. He has a lot to say. So Billy is very cool. Billy and I tend to be on the same speaking circuit, and so I know he's coming here that week for October 13th. We're going to be in Montclair, New Jersey, another independent retailer, Lucas and Ruby, has put together a phenomenal day with Karen Becker, Billy, myself, and a couple of Melissa Shelton from Animalio. That's a really phenomenal day. I'm pretty sure it's sold out, but when you have independent retailers who are willing to pay the money to bring in people of that caliber, you should support them. So these guys are great, and I was in their other store, so it's nice to see what's here and go around, and you might notice I was taking pictures because they have some products that I wasn't aware of, and I'm thinking, ooh, these might be good things to have in my of retail. You know, we're not a pet store where we're trying to sell a lot of food. We have enough that we can get you started on something and then send you somewhere to go find what you need. So most of my seminars, I don't have a planned talk. You might notice there's no PowerPoint. That's just not me. When I have to do a PowerPoint presentation, which I will in Montclair, for me that's really weird because I feel like I'm like chained down. We tend to be a lot more audience driven, answering questions. So there's a few hot topics that are out there with pet food. Food is my specialty. I can talk about, you know, over-vaccination. I can talk about the chemicals that we're using too much of. I can talk about cancer. I can talk about whatever we want to. But I love food, and I love talking about food. So a few hot topics that have been in the news recently, and we finally have a little bit of attention from the FDA, which, by the way, FDA, in my book, pretty useless. I mean, they just don't regulate things. They make the laws, and they don't regulate their own laws. So if you've heard Susan Thixton speak, she and Billy and I tend to travel around a lot together. Susan is from truthaboutpetfood.com, and if you are not following her, you should absolutely be following her. Susan is our representative at AFCO, which is the American Association of Feed Control Officials. So pet food is not regulated as food, it's regulated as feed, animal feed. So our dogs and our cats are looked at like livestock. So the rules are pretty much very similar to the rules for livestock feed. And the scary part of that is that the rules for livestock feed also are really awful, and we are eating that livestock that is eating things that are not very healthy. So one of the rules the FDA, or laws the FDA made, says that pet feed must be made with animals that have died only from slaughter, not animals that have died in the field, not what we call 4D meat, which is diseased, dead,
dying,
toxic. So when you go on Susan's website, she's done some beautiful blogs, she gets beautiful pictures. When you read on the bag and it says chicken is the first ingredient. Now everybody get an image of chicken in your head, you know, there's that nice roaster that you're buying at the grocery store and you're thinking, all right, chicken. Yeah, have you seen the pictures of the moldy, green, rotten, melting chicken? Because that's what's in the dog food. Even though legally it's not allowed in there. And when Susan had a meeting with the FDA and said, well, are you going to enforce this law? She has it on a recording. They said, nope, not going to enforce it. We don't care. I was at one of the AFCO meetings, and we said, well, why should our pets, who are our children at this point in life, most of us, we treat them like our children, that's why you're here. Your dog's actually going to pretty much guarantee you're not tied to a tree in the backyard with a doghouse. You know, I'm thinking that most of the pets in here are sleeping in your bed, and they're, you know, being fed really good stuff, and, you know, they're getting their checkups, and you really, you know, are very concerned about what's going into their body and what their health is. So when you're reading chicken on a label, you've got that picture of that roaster that you're putting in the oven for you. You don't have a picture of green, diseased, decaying, cancer-filled meat. But that is what the FDA allows us to do. And we know for a fact pet food comes to mind. What? How did I come up with that? Because the fox is watching the hen house. Really, nobody's watching anything. So the FDA puts it up to the states to regulate what's going on and to do the testing. Now, sadly, they care a lot more about what the label says and what the bag looks like than they do about what's inside the bag. So they will go after a company if they have the wrong wording, or the wrong font, or the wrong size of the lettering. But what's in the bag? Oh, it hasn't killed any dogs recently. Yes, it has. So some of you might remember about a year and a half ago, January of 2017, Tallulah, the little pug that was killed by the Avengers, hunks of beef canned food that had pentobarbital. So the woman's from California, she fed all of her dogs the same food for dinner, and within 10 minutes she had, it was 4 or 5 dogs that were down. So it was pretty clear, wow, what did all the dogs just get exposed to? Whatever's in that food. She ran them all to the emergency service. The one dog died. And she was smart enough to have saved some food. She also had more cans, and the veterinarian was smart enough to test the stomach contents. They tested the cans, they tested the stomach contents. Very high levels of pentobarbital. What's pentobarbital? Euthanasia solution. How does that get in dog food? Think out. How does it get in there? And when you go to the Avengers website, what does it say? Human grade meats, USDA inspected, top of the top, charging premium pricing. Now, even after this happened, their website still said that. Yet they still say that. Who was watching over that? When they did the investigation, I have a radio show every week, DreamVision7radio.com, Monday and Tuesday, 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern. But everything is archived on Dream Vision 7. I just interviewed the lawyer who is representing this family against Avengers, and she's picking up a ton of other lawsuits with the pet industry, which I think it's great that somebody finally cares enough to be going after them. So Avengers still denies that they ever did anything wrong. What was found out is that the person they were buying their meat from was the dead animal guy. So he's the guy going around and picking up the dead cows out of the field, the horses that have been euthanized. They did find the DNA of horse in the hunks of beef. Why is horse meat in hunks of beef? Because they weren't paying attention. Now, the question still remains, was Avengers dumb enough to not know that they were buying from the dead animal guy? Or were they just trying to pull the wool over everybody's eyes? when asked for their certificates of USDA inspection, the numbers that they supplied don't exist. It's not even like the same length of number. So who's telling the truth, who's not telling the truth? And this happens all the time. So what was the last one? Pedigree, Gaines, which is all owned by Mars, pentobarbital found in their food. It's interesting, it's about a week and a half ago, I did the interview with the lawyer, and she said, did you see what just popped up in our news feed this morning? Because we all get the letters from the food companies. And that day, like literally 5 minutes before I'm interviewing her, up popped the press release that the FDA is now investigating pentobarbital in pet food. They think it's a little more widespread than previously thought. Well, I thought it was there. You know, the FDA. Blinders? No, it's there. It is there, and it has been, this is not a new problem. There is research from the 90s when the FDA went in and did some testing. Oh, look at that, there's pentobarbital in pet food. How is that getting there? When the dead animals are rendered, where are those dead animals coming from? Well, yep, there's euthanized dogs and cats that are going in there. There are euthanized horses going in there. And there are diseased cows, zoo animals, you name it. And that's what makes a rendered product. So I'm a little bit crazy about first of all, I don't like dry kibble. And you'll notice there's dry kibble on the shelves. Now, these guys have their choice. They want all of us to be buying a really species-appropriate, healthy food, and they told me their number one food is Answers. But 95% of the human population that has pets eats dry kibble. So if we're going to have 95% of the population feeding dry kibble, then we need to find the healthiest ones we possibly can, because people want convenience. You know, I'm not about the convenience, I'm about having healthy dogs. But I get it. Some people, you know, they've got crazy busy lives, although I will refute that with I have a crazy busy life, and, you know, we can make it work. And frankly, taking a freeze-dried product and adding water takes no more time than pouring kibble on a bowl. Taking something out of the freezer and warming it up a little bit and putting it in the bowl takes really no more time than kibble. So, you know, unless I can be really sure about what's in that kibble, I'm a little bit crazy. So I would frankly rather see a whole meat product than a meal, because that meal has been cooked and rendered down. So cooking will kill the bacteria. So when you see those, it was not that far from here, near Pittsburgh, I think, two summers ago, a truck full of dead cow carcasses broke down. It wasn't even covered. It wasn't refrigerated. It was a bunch of dead cows in the back of a big, like, open truck. And they were on their way to the rendering plant, but the truck broke down. It was 95 degrees. It's the middle of summer. We have rotting carcasses in front of a car dealership. It smelled so bad that the car dealership kept calling, you know, the township and saying, you gotta get this truck out of here. We have to close down. This is so bad. We can't be open. So it sat there and rotted in the sun for a good 24 hours before they got that truck out of there. FDA considers that meat perfectly usable, so it went in. Now, if you're getting a little nervous about this, that's good, because I want you to be a little nervous about this, and I want you to take the time to investigate the companies whose products you're buying, or to ask people who know about the products that you're buying. So for me, a lot of times if I'm recommending a product, it's because I've been to the plant, I've met the owners, I've seen how it's processed, I've seen their sourcing, and I know what's going in there. Not all of us can do that. I get it. You're not going to say, well, Answers is close by, so that's easy. Hey, I'm just going to pop over there and see what they're doing. You know, we happened to go to Georgia and met the people at All Provide, showed up with all of our camera equipment, said, hi, we're here to take a tour and videotape it. Now, just try to do that up here. I wouldn't get, well, first of all, I probably can't even pull in their parking lot without getting arrested. But those guys were like, yeah, come on in. You know, and we went in and we took a tour and we went through their freezers and we saw all their human grade meats. And we, you know, Answers is the same way. You know, so we're looking for companies that we have that level of trust. Now, I guarantee if any of you had called Evangers, if you call them now, or if you called them during that entire process, they would tell you, oh yes, human grade. Absolutely, ethically sourced. Oh, no pentobarbital in our food. No, we're good. All good. That's what they will tell you. So when we tell you, call the company, ask them their ingredients, ask them their sourcing, how do you know if they're telling the truth? You know, if you can get them to tell you who their meat supplier is, then Google is your best friend. You look up that name, you look at their address, and then Google, who's the dead animal guy in that township? If they're one and the same, not so good. Satellite, Google Satellite is also a good friend. You'd be amazed what you will see on Google Satellite. So if you satellite down and you see trucks with rotting carcasses in the back of the plant, yeah, it's probably not good food. If you see, you know, piles of carcasses, I have great pictures of piles of carcasses, not so good. You don't want your meats rotting out in the sun before it's getting rendered into your pet food. Now, why does it matter? Cooking will kill the bacteria in that meat. That's not the problem. But when those bacteria are killed, they release endotoxins, and those endotoxins are deadly. The other problem that we have, okay, so this is going to segue into the next FDA problem that we're having right now. So we've got pentobarbital, we've got disgusting meats that are going into food that they're not regulating. So the other thing that goes into a lot of dry kibble, whether you're buying full of grain or grain-free, so grain-free has become the really big buzz over the past 5, 6, 8 years. So everybody says, oh, grain-free is so much better. Well, no, not necessarily. Well, I'll tell you why. So the problem with grains, wheat, corn, soy, about 75, I get the drought reports. You guys can subscribe to all this stuff too, but I get all the agriculture reports and the drought reports. And about 75% of the wheat and corn this year, because of the perfect drought and rain disasters that we've had, is contaminated with mold. So mold releases a toxin called an aflatoxin. Aflatoxins are deadly to the liver. So where do you think the good grain is going? That's going to Kellogg's and, you know, human sources. Where's all that bad grain going? We're not going to throw it away because, oh, that would be so wasteful. We don't want to fill the landfills, which is the FDA's response to us when we said, hey, we don't want all this disgusting meat in pet food. They said, well, you would have us put that in a landfill? That would be so wasteful. Okay. So there's your landfill right there. So the problem with moldy grain, when these big truckfuls of grain pull up to Purina or Mars or Hills or whoever, they know it's moldy. Now what happens is the people selling the grains, they put the good stuff on top. And so the pet food company takes a sample of the grain and tests it. Well, they're not digging down to the bottom. They're not getting down to the middle, and they're testing a very, very, very small sample on this huge truckload if they're testing it all. And they go, okay, yeah, we see a little mold in there, and they spray it with a fungicide. Well, good, now we have chemicals in there that, by the way, are not destroyed by the heat process. When we kill the mold, that's great, the mold's dead, it releases aflatoxins. So again, our pets are getting their livers pounded by the aflatoxins. Now you're going, well, that's good because I feed grain-free. Well, we can get those same molds on legumes and potatoes. Sometimes they're a little bit different mold, but we can get the same molds. And it's usually the lower quantity, but the molds are still there. So we're still having an aflatoxin problem, even with grain-free. Now, the other problem that we have with grain-free that just came to light in the past 6 months, and the FDA finally said, oh, we're gonna have to make comment on this. You know, things have to get really bad, and a lot of animals have to start dying before the FDA says, yeah, if we don't make a comment, people are gonna come after us, so we'll make a comment. So there was a cardiologist out in California who suddenly was seeing many more cases of dilated cardiomyopathy in breeds that are not genetically prone to it. So if you see dilated cardiomyopathy in a Doberman and a Boxer, you kind of go, genetics, he's gonna die, genetics. When you start seeing it in golden retrievers and Boston Terriers and Bichons and breeds that is not a genetic problem for them. This guy was great, and he started asking questions, and he had his clients fill out surveys. And what he found, the common denominators there, all being fed a grain-free food. So then he said, ooh, maybe we should look at grain-free food. Now this is great, because cardiologists, 90% of them, they don't give one hoot about what you're feeding your animal. If your dog is in heart failure, they might go, yeah, you should probably restrict the salt. Which, by the way, a salt-free diet is not what they need. It is not good. Salt does not affect them like it does us as far as the blood pressure, because unless you're feeding foods that are highly preserved with salt, it's not a problem. But that's about the wealth of information that your cardiologist will give you regarding feeding your dog with heart disease. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 out of the 5 here have heart disease, pretty severe heart disease in this stroller. That's why they're there. And if they weren't fed an appropriate diet, if these guys were eating grain-free food, they'd have been dead a long time ago. So we have 13, 15, and 17. Pookie's been on cardiac meds since 2012. That's a long time for a Cavalier on cardiac meds. But I attribute it to the fact that they're eating a species-appropriate diet that feeds their heart. So what this cardiologist found is that these dogs had a taurine deficiency. Where do we find taurine? Taurine is found in meat, muscle meat, particularly heart muscle. Now when you see byproducts on a label, that's actually the organ meat. So it's not necessarily all bad. And I do want our pets to be fed byproducts. I want them to have heart, liver, kidney, pancreas, spleen, tongue. All that stuff is good for them. So that's why we feed things like whole fish. You know, you feed the entire sardine. If you buy a real sardine, they're like this big. You feed the entire thing. So they're getting the eyeballs and they're getting the brains and they're getting all the good stuff. So if we're grinding our own meats, I buy bags of organ meats that has, so like rabbit organs, duck organs, chicken organs, it's got all the organs in there. So we're getting all that good stuff. So what we found with these animals with cardiomyopathy is they were deficient in taurine. Now, when they tested the grain-free foods, some of them did have taurine deficiency. Others had plenty of taurine, because some pet food companies, they know the food's deficient, so they add it back in as a synthetic. Okay, great. So how come the food is testing that it has enough taurine, and the animals are still developing dilated cardiomyopathy? We don't know the answer to that yet. I suspect, and a couple of other scientists have said this, so I'm glad that my little brain came up with it, is that the legumes and potatoes somehow are blocking the absorption of the taurine. And the taurine is not there in most of these foods in like enough excess that will override that. So we don't really know. But because grain-free foods have become so popular, the problem is getting bigger. So I think it's the University of California at Davis is doing the taurine testing. They are overwhelmed because now this is starting to make the news. And a lot of people keep sending me the article, keep sending me the news flashes that are coming on the news. I'm like, yeah, that's great, it's getting noticed. So it's getting noticed, and we know that these animals are low, so a lot of people who have been feeding grain-free food for years, they're running into the veterinarian going, I want my dog tested for taurine. Well, it's not a normal test that shows up on any normal lab work, so you're not gonna see it. It's a specific test, and it's not a cheap test. And this lab is now overwhelmed and has a backlog because so many people are testing for it. So you have a couple of options if you're waiting for your tests to come back. You can add a taurine supplement. So for a small dog, 250 milligrams a day. For a medium to large dog, 500 milligrams a day. I had a golden retriever that came into me that had been eating grain-free food. The dog was only about 4 years old. And so when the woman heard about this, she freaked out, came in for a nutritional consult. I said, well, have you gotten rid of the grain-free food? Oh yes, that's why we're here. So, which is great. So she took action. She went to the cardiologist, had an echocardiogram done. Everything still looked fine on this dog. Had the taurine level tested. We want the dog to be at 200, hers was at 47. Pretty darn low. So thank God this came to light because, another year down the line, this woman might have been standing there with a totally different situation and a dog that was dying of heart failure. So we're finding that when these dogs get supplemented, they do have some part repair, but depends at what stage they're at. So $250 for the small dogs, $500 for the medium to large dogs. $250 for the small guys. You get bigger dogs, so $500. Yes.
I just have a question. So we know that taurine is essential for cats, right? Because they can't make taurine.
Right.
So in this instance, could it also be that we're not actually providing the right amino acids so that the bodies of the dogs can make the taurine, and we're replacing it with plants that don't provide those amino acids?
Exactly. So the plants don't have taurine. I don't care what plant you use. Plants don't have taurine. So we need the carnitine, we need the methionine, we need the things that are the building blocks for that. And because these diets are very low in meat, it's just not there. So, you know, if you want to continue to feed it, so my clients who come in and they're like, no, I'm gonna continue to feed this grain-free kibble because it's just easy and I just wanna dump it in the bowl, and I feel like saying, well, you're standing in the wrong office, but okay, here we are. So, you know, I said, well, here's your options. You can go buy a taurine supplement, by the way, it's cheap. I mean, a bottle of 100 pills is like $7. So pretty simple. Or let's just add a topper of meat. Let's just give your pet what they're meant to eat. Now, for the people that want to make their cats into vegetarians and vegans, do not walk in my office. I will not see you. I will not treat your cat. That is animal cruelty. Your cat will die. I don't care what supplements, I don't care what chemicals you add to that food, your cat's gonna die a painful, awful death. And I had one client that, and this is when I made up my mind, I had one client that she absolutely insisted that her cat was gonna be vegan. And so the cat developed non-healing ulcerated wounds on the hind legs, could not get them healed up. She finally, you know, I got sick of playing with it. She went to the University of Pennsylvania, so they started playing with it, and oh yeah, the cat was also in heart failure, and the cat's protein levels were so low that we couldn't heal the wounds. And then, oh, by the way, it died of its heart failure while it was at the university. And so this was a train wreck that I saw coming down the line, and I was like, well, great, somebody else can play with this because I'm done. And so I just won't treat them because I don't want that on my conscience. And if I talk to one blue in the face and you just can't get what I'm saying to save your cat's life, I'm just not gonna do it.
Also, you almost can't treat them. You
No,
almost can't.
you can't. There's no treatment.
Yeah,
So
it's
it's kind of like, I really don't want you to
drugs on, but-
die under my care. Like, I will hold you in my arms and I will love you, but I can't stand to watch that. So, so if you have kitty cats, please, they're metosauruses. Make them metosauruses. They are obligate carnivores. They need and want to be carnivores. Raw food is absolutely the best for kitties. Kibble is absolutely the worst for kitties. Kitties should never have kibble past their lips. And the problem is if you have a carb junkie cat who is addicted to kibble, it might take you 6 to 12 months to get them converted over. Anybody here have cats? Before I spend a lot of time on kitties, anybody have cats eating kibble? Okay, good. So here's how we're gonna do, will your cat eat canned food?
My one cat has a history of urinary tract infections.
He absolutely shouldn't be on
Well,
kibble.
no, so the vet has me on a prescription diet, okay? And so I try to feed it to him, but he'll eat the gravy.
Yeah.
And
So
then-
welcome to the world of cats. They're the biggest pain. And people say to me, why don't you have a cookbook for cats? Why don't you have a bunch of recipes for cats? Hey, I'll tell you how to make it. You tell them he has to eat it. And they don't like leftovers. So don't you dare get a can out of the refrigerator. Don't you dare take something out of the freezer that you cooked yesterday. They don't like it. And they're kind of a pain. I love cats. We have 4 cats. So here's what it took me. So our 3 young cats, when we bottle raised them, and they started eating out of the raw food bowls with our dogs as soon as they were old. They just, played in the bowl with them. So that was easy. Those guys were addicted to raw food from day 1. So if you can start them out that way, yay, life is easy. If you have a carb-addicted cat, because if they're on dry food, that's the problem. They're addicted to carbs. And we get a lot of diabetic cats, because what happens, they don't process carbs well at all. And it just breaks down into sugars, and then they like to become diabetic. So what happens is they go to the dry food, they eat their little teaspoon, tablespoon of food, or in my case, if my cats ever get exposed to kibble, they're like, oh, Crackosaurus rex. I mean, they're crazy, and then they vomit it right back up. So I'm like, oh, that worked well. But what happens is they get the little bit of food, they get a sugar rush. And they're like, oh, feel good. And then their pancreas says, oh, I better dump some insulin in here. So their sugar goes up, the pancreas dumps insulin, sugar goes down. And then the cat's like, run back to the bowl. So if you notice, cats that eat dry food tend to be grazers. They're back and forth, back and forth. We are putting pancreatic stress, we're begging that cat to become a diabetic because his pancreas is always doing the spike dump all day long. When you feed them a species appropriate diet, they sit, they eat the food, they go away. So our cats eat twice a day. They're trained just like the dogs. They come, they eat, they go. Oh, do you want to get on the floor? You're just really hot. I'm a cold tile. So, with heart disease, you gotta watch tongues on these guys all the time. So for your kitty cats who are addicted to that dry kibble, so the only reason that prescription diet works is because it's got drugs in it. It has methionine in it to lower the urine pH and hopefully keep crystals from forming. But it's absolutely the wrong thing. So when we feed our pets a dehydrated product, that has about 6% moisture in it. And I did the math once to try to figure out how much, people say, hey, why add water to this kibble? That's great. How much water do you put in that kibble? Oh, I give them a cup of food and I put, half cup of water in there. Well, that's great. You need 2 gallons per cup. You might get it close to what it started out as. That's a lot of water. So you're never getting them back up to that moisture level. So your kitty cats or your dogs that are eating only dry kibble, they're running around in a constant state of dehydration because their body has to put water into that, so it's pulling it out of the cells. So it has, and when you have animals who eat dry food, you'll notice they drink a lot. I get this call all the time when I switch people over to a raw food diet, and they're like, my dog quit drinking, what do I do? He's fine now. He doesn't need all that water. He's not trying to rehydrate that dry thing that you put in there. People who are worried about bloat in their dogs, just stop feeding them dry kibble and then letting them drink a gallon of water. You'll solve a lot of trouble there. So it's an oxymoron to feed an animal with a urinary problem a dry kibble, because urinary problems are all about moisture. So if we've got kidney disease, putting them on a prescription dry kibble is like the worst thing in the world that you can do for them.
So how is the best way to transition?
So transition your key. What you want to do, and you guys are mostly dog stuff. It's obviously called Doglicious. The cats are always like bottom.
we have raw. We have Karoo, which is
for kitties.
Oh yeah.
Okay, great. All right. So the easiest way to transition them, part of it is a texture thing. So when I first brought home frozen raw food for my cats, they played with it like a hockey puck. They were like, yeah, that not food. They don't recognize it. They don't recognize it. Now you would think nature tells them raw meat on my plate. That's like a dead mouse. Yay. No, we have unnaturally told them, you're looking for those little dry brown balls. They go crunch, crunch, or they swallow them whole 90% of the time. So kibble does not work the teeth and gums. Kibble destroys the teeth and gums. Debunk that myth right now. So your kitty's used to that texture. Get a freeze-dried raw. So a couple of the companies make freeze-dried raw that's in nice little nuggets.
I did that as a snack.
Perfect. So take that, sprinkle it over their kibble. Don't add any water to it yet. And then you're gradually going to keep adding more of that and taking more kibble out until there's nothing in the bowl except that freeze-dried. Then you're going to start sprinkling water on it. And eventually you're going to get it up to the high moisture that it's meant to be fed and that you want it to be fed. Once you get them to that point, then sometimes they'll accept the frozen raw. However, anybody who's feeding raw, always, always, always warm, or even if you're feeding canned food that you're pulling out of the fridge, always warm the food to body temperature. It's not meant to be eaten cold. So the Europeans are much smarter than us. They drink warm beer. We are not, our digestive system hates cold. It hates cold. Like if you want to screw up the guts, you want to get a lot of IBD, you want to get a lot of diarrhea, belching, burping, blah, 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 feed things that are cold, and you will have trouble.
Did you say even for the dog and cat, that it's supposed to be room temperature?
Yes. Yeah. So even our dogs.
Okay.
So for us, for them, everything should be at room temperature. Now that gets a little bit tricky. We use the Answers goat milk. So I'm pulling it out of the fridge, and obviously it's cold. It came out of the fridge. So you have a choice. You can, leave it sitting down on the counter. So I have left ours sitting out on the counter for a week, and what it does is it just continues to ferment. And it's funny because I said this in one of my Facebook Lives the other day, and somebody said, well, I called Answers, and they said you shouldn't leave it out for 11 hours. I'm like, okay, there's a general public where you have to give the politically correct answer because people freak out. And then there's, me having conversation over dinner with people from Answers, and they're like, just leave it on the counter, it continues to ferment. And I did that because when you pour it out of the container, when you have a fermented milk product that's been in the freezer, it's kind of separated into the curds and whey. So you've got the little chunkies, and then you've got kind of this watery milk. Well, the chunkies are the good part. So I said, well, I'm just going to leave it out on the counter and see what happens. Well, it continues to ferment. When it's like, it's like kombucha, it's like kimchi, anything that you leave at room temperature, it's just going to continue to ferment.
What about their food? Like if you're trying to get it to room temperature, can you leave it out overnight so in the morning when you feed
You could.
it's
So their food, it's the same thing. It's fermented. And I'm going to tell a story. Which one is the one that lives in Oregon? Jackie or Roxanne?
Roxanne.
Roxanne. So she doesn't, this again, there's what you can tell the public, and there's what you can tell a good friend. So we buy, because we have a lot of dogs, we get the Answers in their 30-pound bulk box. So they come in these 2.5-foot long, 2.5-pound sausages. And so Roxanne has a big German Shepherd that obviously she feeds her food. So she takes that long sausage and wings it out in the backyard. And the dog buries it. And he has them buried all over their yard. And then 2 or 3 days later, he goes and digs them up and eats them. Because they've been out there, they've been fermenting, and they've got some soil organisms in there as well. And her dog is beautiful. Her dog is beautiful. So with a fermented product, it just ferments when you leave it at room temperature. Now, because so my goat milk, I'll leave it out and let it, be room temperature. It gets thicker and thicker. It's like turning into a yogurt while it's sitting there. We use it up within 5 to 7 days because we have a lot of geese that are eating it. If I was going to leave it, maybe I'd put a smaller amount out. So they said 11 hours when this person called. So, stick it in the fridge overnight and then, take it out first thing in the morning and leave it out for the day if you want. However you want to do it. Take out just the amount that you need for the next day and leave it on the counter so that it's room temperature. For our guys, we take our food out of the fridge and we're always in a hurry. So we bought, our dog kitchen doesn't have running water. So we were using a Keurig coffee machine, and we finally got smart. We bought, one of those water coolers that does both instant hot and instant cold. Bought one of those. I just, put some instant hot water in there, put a little bit in the bottom of the bowl to warm up the bowl, then I put the food in and stir it around, and it just is enough to bring it up to room temperature. It's killing off a little bit of the good probiotics because we're putting hot water on them, but there's enough in there, it's not going to be a problem, and then we put the dog milk on after that. But you do want it to be as close to room temperature as you can get, and frankly, we should not put ice in our drinks. We should be eating things. Oops. We kind of missed through our wrap. You got a little spot there. But we didn't hit the coffee cups.
in the coffee. You're bad.
So this is one of those when we go to adopt this dog, he's kind of a rescue situation. And as she hands me the dog, she goes, by the way, it's not house trained. Well, I thank you. Because I needed one more that's not house trained. We only have 7 that aren't house trained. Rescue dog. Except
finally am, though.
he's pretty good. Not always pretty good. Pookie is actually the best. She's the little cute Blenheim running around wherever she went. She's pee-pad trained. And I used to get so mad because we'd put her outside and she'd stay out there for an hour and then she'd come in and immediately run to a pad and pee. I'm like, you were just outside. No, she's pee-pad trained. I love that dog. So we can go to any hotel, anywhere, throw down a pee-pad, boom, done. Don't try to make her go outside. But she's, that's wonderful. The dog is trained. She never misses the pad. As long as there's a pad, she's good to go. Shane is pretty good, but half the time she's about 4 feet away from the pad. And then for the boys, how many of you have seen those disposable pads that have the little fire hydrant that pops up in the middle? So nobody's seen these. So the problem with boys, they want that vertical surface. So somebody came out, and they're on Amazon. It's the regular disposable pee pads, but there's a little cardboard fire hydrant. Fire hydrant shape that pops up in the middle of this pee pad, so you give your boys a target. Pretty cool. You should carry those.
I'm thinking about getting one for our boat.
Yeah.
because when we were going.
Because what are you gonna do?
Yeah, on our boat, we thought it'd be, instead of, being on the sides.
Yeah. So, there's somebody who thought outside the box and came up with the perfect thing. Now, it's interesting with our guys, if we use disposable pads, it's a toy. They play tug of war, they shred them, but the washable pee pads, they're like, oh, yeah, good. They do a lot of laundry, but that's okay. Okay, so we talked about grain-free, we talked about taurine, we talked about aflatoxins, we talked about pentobarbital. Okay,
We need to get into vaccines, chemicals, flea and tick, that whole flea and tick next guard and all that stuff came up.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so, I just had a thought about food. Oh, recalls. So all these recalls that you're seeing on raw food. Let's see, seems like there haven't been recalls on any kibble or canned recently.
Right.
Although, what did we find pentobarbital in? Oh yeah, that would be kibble and canned. No testing being done there. And the only illnesses in humans associated with pet food have been salmonella in dry kibble. But what are we testing? Only raw. So the State Department of Agriculture, Department of Health. Well, I guess it depends on the state. But they have their little guys who work under the FDA, and they can walk into this pet store at any time, pull a product off the shelf, and take it for testing. And so they're doing that across the country in the states that are doing anything at all. And so they take it back to their lab. Now, God knows what they do with that food from the time they pull it out of the freezer here and get to their lab. They test it, it grows some salmonella or some E. coli, which, by the way, are in our environment all the time. We are all exposed to it all the time. So there was just a big, I want to say beef recall. A guy died from salmonella and a bunch of people got sick out west a couple weeks ago, which the USDA allows contaminated meat in the grocery store. They know it's contaminated. It's allowed because it's assumed that you will cook it, which is pretty funny because I have a couple clients who eat raw meat themselves. So we know they're eating contaminated meat because that's allowed. But they're going in, and this is a vendetta trying to shut down the raw food companies, because what is the largest growing population in the pet food? Raw feeders. So it's growing, and the big pet food companies, Nestle, Purina, Mars, I think they own Royal Canin, Hills, I mean, all those guys, they don't like the fact that a little bit of their profit's being taken. Now, which is kind of ridiculous, because Mars sells billions and billions of dollars in pet food. They are so far above numbers 2, 3 through 10. I mean, it's not even close. Partly because worldwide they have the biggest presence. They've gone into a lot of third world countries. So like when we go to the Caribbean or Central America and I find a place that's selling pet food, it's all going to be products that are made by them because they're just shipping it all over the place. Why did I start on? Oh, recalls. So basically, if states are doing any testing at all, they're only testing raw foods. So why is it that every recall we see, it's raw food? Because that's all they're testing. They're not testing anything. If they start testing some other things, maybe we'll see some other things. But what's really interesting is they'll come out and say, well, we tested and we had salmonella grow in this. So we want you to issue a recall. Now, these recalls are all voluntary by the companies. The FDA has not actually issued a recall saying this company has to recall this stuff. Every one of these companies, they're doing it voluntarily because they don't want their name drugged through the mud. What's interesting, I think it was Vital Essentials had a recall and it was tested and they said, well, that's pretty funny because we've got that batch sitting here in our freezer. We tested it before it went out. There was nothing. They tested a batch that they still had in their freezer. Nothing. So what's happening in the handling of that sample and what is happening in those laboratories where it's being tested? So who are we going to trust? Depends what the company is buying it for. If it's a good company, and they're telling me, look, I tested this. Like, I know a lot of these companies are testing before their food goes out because they're worried. And you'll hear rumors that everybody's going to go to HPP, high pressure pasteurization, or they're going to use a viral phage to eat the bacteria. They're going to do some sort of a kill step. because the FDA is making them. Well, they're not. The FDA is not making them. Anybody who goes to HPP, they are doing it voluntarily. Mostly because their lawyers are sitting there going, you know, you better do something so you don't get caught. But there's no guarantees for that. So there are companies, Stella and Chewy's, they HPP all their poultry products. Primal HPPs their poultry products. And oh, by the way, they're still getting recalls. So HPP is not a guarantee either. And for those of us who are purists, we don't really like HPP, so what they do is they put the food under high pressure, and it's in the bag when that happens, so you're driving the plastics from the bag into the food, you're also denaturing the food. So if you're a true raw feeder, you're not gonna want HPP. The reason they HPP their poultry is that poultry is much more likely to be contaminated than other products. If the food is grass-fed, pasture-raised, its chances of contamination are much smaller. So if you've never seen a confinement operation for poultry or pigs or cows, I would recommend that you at least Google it and look at what it looks like. So Hugh's from Texas, we were there visiting the family, we're driving down the highway from the airport, and he goes, oh, there's a confinement operation down there. You know, and you can just sort of see it over the hill. He knew what it was. I would not. Feed yard, thank you. So, yeah, he said feed yard. I'm like, confinement operation. Anyway, so I'm like, honey, hang left. So we go down there and I'm like, so literally the cows are elbow to elbow like this in manure up to here. And then there's big feeders around the edges where they dump all the grain and grocery store waste products and everything else that the FDA says can go feed. And so, do we have to wonder why that meat is more contaminated? Let's see, they stand and poop up to their elbows all day, every day. We were, this was in Texas as well, we were driving out through the country. I don't know how we got on this detour, probably because I said, hey, go down here, I want to see this. And I have photos of literally mountains of manure. And, is that Texas?
It's the only mountains we have.
Yeah. Mountains of manure, and the cows all standing on top of it. Because, you know, every once in a while they scrape it all up, and they make it in these big mountains, and the cows are all standing on these mountains of manure. And I'm like, wow, that's the meat. So, I recommend grass-fed, pasture-raised.
When you get your organ meats, how do you know that they're not from those cows?
So you got to talk to the people you're getting them from.
Yes.
Is the thing. So I was recommending a company up in Pittsburgh, and I finally, you know, and I read the website, blah, 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 and I finally thought, you know, I better have a conversation with these people. And so I called them and I asked them, and basically they're getting a call from local Amish farmers. The Amish don't really do confinement raised. And so a lot of people fault answers because they use the Amish. Oh, puppy mills, I could never deal with anything that has to do with the Amish. Okay, folks, let's look at history and say when we say we're not going to have anything to do with one group of people because some of that group of people does things that we don't like, all prejudice. That's a bit of a problem. We actually went through that in our house. So we have Amish markets, and I don't know, 8 years ago, Hugh said, we're not going to the Amish market anymore. They have puppy mills. Not going to do this. And we get very involved in rescue, and I went, well, we could go ask each one of the vendors in the Amish market if they raise dogs. That might be a better way to do this. But we didn't go there for about 5 years. And so we cut off a good supply. You know, you can find rabbit, it's hard to find. You can get it from them. Duck, hard to find, you can get it from them. So you just need to kind of look at the suppliers, know who you're dealing with. So the folks from Answers, I mean, they do, that's an uphill battle for them because they work with the Amish. They're Amish farmers. Like they just did it. Did you guys go on the tour? Yeah. And they introduced all their farmers to, there's a lot of independent pet store people. I couldn't go, and I would love to. One of these years I'll be able to.
There's a good one.
But it's great, because they introduce you to all their farmers and they show you what they're doing. And so the reason Answers has never had a recall, they never will, is their fermentation process. And other companies are looking at the fermentation process. So I had a conversation with the folks from Answers about this over dinner. And I said, okay, well, you're never going to have a recall. And the reason is because when you do the fermenting, you get all those good bacteria. Those are probiotics. That's what that is. Those are good bacteria. When the good bacteria are there in a high enough colonization, the bad guys can't grow. So everybody sitting here in this audience right now, you have more good guys than bad guys in your gut, or you wouldn't be sitting here. When you take antibiotics and you kill off the good guys, the bad guys overgrow. I've had family members that have died from clostridial overgrowth from taking antibiotics. So every time you have to take antibiotics, be scared and get some probiotics before. So with their food, you're never going to get an overgrowth of bad bacteria because there's too many good guys. So they never have to worry about recall, and they know that. So they're not worried. So they don't have to do a kill step. So let's say another company says, well, all right, I'm going to start fermenting. Well, that'll only work if you're starting with clean meats. If you start with confinement raised, really dirty meat, you're not going to overcome it. So some of these companies that are getting more recalls, and like I said, not all these recalls are real, but we might want to look at what their sourcing is. So it can be very hard to track that down because they may not tell you the truth when you call. Use your Google satellite, see what's there. I do this too when people call me for consultations and I ask where they got their dog or their puppy. And it's really high class breeder, really high quality, came out of, Georgia, whatever, and I went there and I went in this nice little room and it was beautiful. And while they're talking, I'm satellite Googling. And I'm like, so did you get to see what was behind that little building? Because there was about 6 rows of chicken coop looking buildings behind them. And that's where they're puppy mill breeding all their dogs. Flabbergasted, she paid $5,000 for this labradoodle. It was supposed to be her therapy dog. He was 3 years old, had the worst hip x-rays I'd ever seen. And the dog was so painful and couldn't move. She goes, but they're supposed to be a really reputable breeder. And then when I, turned her on to what was really going on, she goes, my husband's a lawyer, we're on it.
That is a severe problem in our area. We are the capital of the East Coast of puppy mills.
Absolutely.
And
Driving
that is,
through Ohio, we saw it.
unfortunately, the majority of the people that come in, that's where their dogs have come from,
Yes.
and it's unbeknownst to them,
Yeah.
because they're thinking that they're getting,
High quality.
from,
Yeah, so it's really hard.
So we're dealing with that, because now you've got that sickness
Yeah.
already starting in
Yeah,
that dog.
so
that
you've
we're
got
trying-
a dog that's genetically challenged.
Right.
And then they get started off on the wrong food,
Right.
and probably got so now we're gonna segue. Probably got way too many vaccines as a puppy.
Right.
So, who knows how many vaccines they
Not,
need as
not
a
if they
puppy?
come from a puppy mill, though.
Well, they don't get them at the puppy mill, but if they go to the pet
Yes,
store.
yes,
So we have
yes,
an Amish
yes,
pet
yes,
store
yes,
near
yes.
us. So they vaccinate them every single week because you never know when their parvo is going to break loose. So we'll just vaccinate them every week. So who knows how many vaccines a puppy should get? Yeah, they do get too many. Anybody want to wager a guess?
4.
I mean,
4.
like 6 or 7, 3.
9.
Core is 3.
3.
Core is 3. So really the core vaccines are distemper, parvo, rabies. Usually we throw adenovirus, which is hepatitis, in there, but I don't even worry about that one. Never see it. So really the core vaccines are distemper, parvo, and rabies. Now, when a puppy or kitten, when they're born, they have maternal immunity. So they drink mom's milk. The colostrum is the first milk, and it has all these antibodies. And they can only absorb that within the first 12 to 24 hours of life. So that's why that first day is so important that they get mom's milk. And that's going to give them the immunity. Now, that's assuming that the mom had some immunity to begin with. So in our area, when we first opened our first clinic, oh my God, 20-some years ago in Clayton, I did the local rabies clinic. I don't know if Pennsylvania does free rabies vaccines, but New Jersey does it. At the fire hall or the ambulance hall once a year you can go. And so the first year we did 950 dogs and cats in a 5-hour time span. And every other rabies clinic I'd ever done, there's 5 people show up, maybe 100 in a couple of hours. Literally 950, and most of them were Rottweilers and Pit Bulls that you knew were tied outside because they were coming in dragging chains that were, links this big, and here's the poor skinny dog that, all they get is their rabies vaccine. And I thought, oh my gosh, where have we moved to? This is awful. And so they weren't getting any core vaccines either, and then they're all breeding willy-nilly because nothing was spayed or neutered in the area. And so we had litters of Rottweilers and Pit Bulls coming in, all summer long, every year, dying apart because they had no vaccines, the mom had no vaccines. So if the mom, somewhere along the way, has developed antibodies to distemper, parvo, whatever, they're going to pass that on to the puppies. Now, the problem is that maternal immunity will wear off at some point. Now, we can't predict, we don't know, because everyone's individual. So somewhere between 6 and 16 weeks of age, those maternal antibodies are going to die off. So a lot of people start vaccinating at 6 weeks of age, saying, well, what if the maternal antibodies took a dump at 6 weeks, and the puppy's not protected. So they'll start vaccinating at 6 weeks, and then they vaccinate every 2 weeks. Because if the maternal antibodies are still there, the vaccine won't work. The vaccine does no good, because the maternal antibodies cancel it out. So you don't know whether you actually vaccinated them. You might have just put something in their system and stressed their immune system, but didn't do anything. So they'll give it every couple of weeks, and particularly if they're in a pet store population where sick dogs are coming in and out, you don't know where they're coming from, who's bringing in what. So they just will err on the side of was given more vaccines. Well, we now know that when they're given more vaccines, they're going to have many more allergy problems later in life. They're going to have autoimmune problems. They're going to have immune system problems. It becomes a nightmare for us. So here's what the true recommendation is. If you are lucky enough to get a puppy or kitten from a breeder who didn't go crazy and start vaccinating very early, first of all, you shouldn't even get that puppy until 10 weeks. I know we all want them when they're really cute, tiny, we want them at 6, 7 weeks, but no, leave them with their litter, leave them with their mama. There's a lot of education that is going on in that first 10 weeks with the litter. Leave them with mama, leave them with their siblings, get them at 10 weeks. Give them a few days to adjust, then take them in and get a single distemper vaccine. Not a combination vaccine, not a DAP, not a DHLPP, not a DHLPP corona, not 17 things at once. One, distemper only. Now good luck, because when you call your veterinarian and say, I want distemper only, they're going to go, we don't have that. No, I need you to get that. No, we don't have that. No, seriously, I need you to get that. No, we don't have that. And they won't buy it. Now I've told people, offer to pay for the entire tray of vaccines. Guess what, it's not that. If they charge you more, they actually pay. Or find a bunch of friends who also want that vaccine. Get a single distemper, if at all possible. Worst case scenario, get a DAP, which is the distemper adenoparvo. Good luck even getting to have that. But you might have more luck than that. So I like a single distemper at about 10 to 12 weeks. And then somewhere 14 to 16 weeks, single parvo. Parvo by itself. Good luck getting that too. And then we come back at 18 to 20 weeks and we do a titer. And 99% of them do it good. And that's all they need. And they will actually have a stronger immunity than if they were given 5 vaccines. We have Dr. Ron Schultz, who is the immunologist, virologist, who does all this research. He has proven these dogs have a stronger immunity when they're given less, and we wait longer to give it. So that's my protocol if I can get that puppy at the right time. And I'm getting more and more of these now, so that's why we know it's working, because I've had clients that have been with me long enough, we're on like their 2nd and 3rd generation of animals, so that they figured out that what we were doing, what they were doing in the past wasn't working, so we want to start with a clean slate. So what I'm really looking forward to in the next 10 years is all these animals that we are now under vaccinating, that we're just doing their 1 parvo, their 1 distemper, and we're starting them on raw food on day 1. What's their health going to be like for the next 10 years? Are we going to get better longevity? Are we going to get no allergies and problems? Okay, so your distemper I do between 10 and 12, and then the parvo between 14 and 16. So they need at least 2 weeks between the 2 vaccines so that they have time for recovery and for their immune system to survive that one. And then we go back and do that titer 18 to 20 weeks. And so if you get a positive titer, that's it. You don't need to give any more. Rabies, I like to wait until a year, particularly in the small breeds. I'll consider starting at 6 months in larger breeds. Rabies. So the big thing with rabies, at least in New Jersey, all the licensing is done in January, between January and March. So we want to time our rabies vaccine so that it occurs between January and March, so that you get the full year out of it. So if we give a vaccine in, say, September, when they go to license in January, they're going to get, oh no, that vaccine doesn't go through the whole year. You can't get a license. You got to revaccinate them. So they make us give that booster way too soon. So I always time them. I've got puppies and kittens coming in, and I'm like, yeah, January is a good time. We do a lot of rabies vaccines in January because I have to time it with the licensing so that we're not being made to get more than they really need. Lepto vaccine, Only if you're really high risk, and if your dog is less than 12 pounds, just don't give it because they're going to have a problem.
And Lyme?
Lyme, yes. I don't recommend Lyme vaccine. So here's the thing with Lyme vaccine. Is it effective? It's about 60% effective if your dog has ever had Lyme, because that's closing the barn door after your livestock is long gone. It'll be about 80% effective if you start them as a puppy. So you get the Lyme vaccine, you take your dog hunting in the woods, and you're like, oh, we got some ticks, no big deal. Okay, well, what about the Ehrlichia? What about the Anaplasma? What about the Rocky Mountain Spotted Fever? We don't even have vaccines for those, and if we did, would you vaccinate for 10 more things? There's a dozen different tick-borne diseases they could get. Why is everybody so hot on vaccinating for Lyme? Which is treatable, by the way. All of them are treatable, by the way. You just have to know that your pet's sick. So, you know, if you take them out and they get a tick exposure, especially if it's a big tick exposure, test them a couple weeks later. So I don't recommend the Lyme vaccine. I mean, my God, a tray of Lyme vaccine will sit in my refrigerator for 6 months before we get through it. And the interesting thing is, when we do our heartworm testing, the heartworm testing includes Lyme, Ehrlichia, and Anaplasma. So most offices do that with a SNAP 40X test, and so you're testing for the tick-borne diseases. We send it out to the lab. It's something called an AccuPlex, and it'll come back on the Lyme as either positive for vaccine antibodies, positive for acute exposure, positive for chronic exposure, or negative. What's really interesting to me is we have dogs who haven't had Lyme vaccines for 8 to 10 years, and on that test they'll still come back positive for vaccine antibodies. Now, Ron Schultz says any antibody is enough. The veterinarians will say, oh, but that's not actually a titer. Yeah, we found vaccine antibodies, but that's not a titer measuring how much protection they have. I'm sorry, they have antibodies, they're protected. Good to go. So if they get an exposure, memory cells in the immune system kick in and say, okay, good, oh, we remember that. Yeah, we can get rid of that. So the vaccine causes more problems than it prevents, which is why the human Lyme vaccine got pulled off the market, because there's now a bunch of people running around that have rheumatoid arthritis and chronic kidney disease and autoimmune disease from that vaccine.
So we pulled it from the humans, and now we're giving it to the dogs.
Oh, we keep making more for the dogs.
Yeah. So
There's
does
a
that make
bunch of them on
sense?
the market.
We pulled it from the humans because they're getting sick or having issues, and we're giving it to the dogs.
It's like the food.
Yeah.
Hey, these are waste products from the human food industry. I think we should feed it to dogs because
But hopefully, in this new FDA thing with the NexGard and the prevention, we actually go in the other direction.
oh yeah, so
Should we do
here's,
that?
let's talk about those. So, NexGard just got labeling that they prevent Lyme disease transmission. That just came out, I saw that in my feed day before yesterday. I went, oh really? Great. So, NexGard, Bravecto, Credelio, Simparica, those are the new generation of isoxazoline drugs that are given orally. Bravecto lasts for 3 months, the others last for 1 month, and they kill fleas and ticks. And veterinarians are like, oh, best thing since sliced bread, because you know that chewable Bravecto that lasts 3 months is like $50. Good money in your pocket. What they're ignoring is the thousands, tens of thousands of deaths, maimed, mutilated dogs. The FDA just came out with this statement within the past week and a half that we think these isoxazoline derivative drugs might be causing seizures and some neurologic problems in a very small percentage of dogs. Perhaps we should consider putting wording about that on the labeling. Now, I don't know about you, but first of all, when you're handed a drug for your pet, how often is it in a little bottle without the drug insert? 99% of the time. How many of you have ever read a drug insert on heartworm preventative? You would. I know her. She would.
Yeah, she would.
Metal personality. When we talk about, you know, metal. She ain't putting nothing in her body or anybody else's body unless she knows everything that it does. Yep. And I will admit, I'm not a metal personality, so I'm like, oh yeah, a little of that. It's okay. Except in my practice, you know, when new drugs, new vaccines, new anything comes out, if you see it on the news and you're like, oh, this great new Cytopoint, anti-allergy stuff, this new thing came out for allergies. I want you to give it to my dog. I'm like, yeah, come back in 6 years. Let me see how many it kills first. Then I'll consider it. So you do not want to use these oral drugs. So I'm on a committee, it's supposed to be a top secret committee, and we're coming out of the woods at some point. We're trying to work with the FDA, and the FDA was like, yeah, we don't care. They might care now that they've said this. So this woman, who's a researcher, gave 1 dose of Bravecto to her very healthy 1-year-old German Shepherd on New Year's Eve. Her vet told her it was fine. And she gave it, and the dog started seizuring that evening. Went to the emergency service, so it was a 1.5 years ago in January, so we're almost 2 years out, and the dog cannot walk without, that's how it was. So, and it still has seizures and is on 5 seizure meds. 1 dose of this drug. Now you tell me this stuff is safe. It is not safe. So when we look at particularly Bravecto, that's the one I'm really screaming about, but all of them are bad. NexGard actually did have labeling on theirs from the get-go that it caused seizures. Here's how much attention your veterinarians pay. So my office manager does beagle rescue. And so she goes and picks up this beagle, brings all of its records, and she has it in her foster care because the dog is a seizure dog and is blind. And the dog's like 3-4 years old. Didn't start out blind and seizuring. This all developed within the past 6 months, which is why the dog was put into rescue, because the people were like, we're not dealing with this. So she gets the dog, she gives me the records, and I start looking through the records. And I see NexGard dispensed every single month, which has a label on it that says should not be used in dogs with seizures. On the receipts every single month, right under the NexGard, is the prescription of phenobarb. So their veterinarian is dispensing a seizure-causing drug with the anti-seizure medication in the same bag every month. Because the people weren't buying it ahead of time, they were going in every month and getting a dose. And I see this for 8 months straight. And I said, did nobody pay attention here? Obviously, nobody paid attention. So what did we do? We took the dog off NexGard. 30 days later, we took the dog off phenobarb. 6 months later, the dog was adopted out as a perfectly normal dog. Who'd have thought? So if you think that your veterinarian reads all those label inserts, I can tell you there's things in my office that I haven't read all the label inserts unless I'm worried about it. They don't. And if you read the label insert for Bravecto, in the original 200 dogs that they studied, one of the dogs died on the 3rd dose, and when they tested it, the levels of Bravecto in the bloodstream were about 6 times normal, 100 times. It was like ridiculously high. They had no explanation for why this dog concentrated the chemical in its bloodstream and didn't get rid of it. 0 explanation, and had a dead dog. Fluke. They just wrote it off as, we don't know why, doesn't matter. Perfectly fine to dispense. So the question is, how many animals have to die before they will sit up and take notice? And this is how crazy our world is. Some epidemiologic group was studying the transmission of malaria in Africa, countries where malaria, thousands of people die from malaria every year in countries where it's a problem. And so they said, well, let's do an epidemiological analysis. So they do this on the computer. And they said, what percentage of the population would we need to give Bravecto to kill off enough mosquitoes to stop the transmission of malaria? What was it, 1/4 or 1/3 of the population? I think it was a quarter. So 1/4 of the population needs to be given this drug, and will kill off enough mosquitoes that there will be no more transmission of malaria. God forbid I don't want to be in that part of the population. And by the way, this is an uneducated population who is not going to get to see the drug insert. And if you look at Bravecto, it says right on there, wear gloves, don't handle, don't touch, blah, blah, blah. And oh, now they have it in a topical for dogs and cats. But you're not allowed to touch it. But your kids are hugging, sleeping with. No, not good. Not good at all. So what do we do for fleas and ticks at our house? So we don't have a huge tick problem, but we go places where there are huge tick problems. So we camp in Gettysburg, and there's big signs. If you've ever been there, there's signs all over the place. Stay on the path, wear your DEET repellent, blah, blah, blah. So I said, all right. We were camping there. We had our dogs with us. I'm like, well, we're going for a walk. Screw this. And we're not staying on the path because why would you follow us? So no fun. So the dogs are romping through the high grass, and it's just, tick infestation there. But we we had put essential oil sprays on our dogs and us before we went romping through the grass. And we were all fine. Came back with no ticks. I don't want the chemicals on me. I don't want the chemicals on them. So these guys carry Wondercide, great product. That one's a cedar one, and I think now they have lemon.
There is lemongrass actually works phenomenal.
Yeah,
We've noticed a
great.
huge.
So there's a bunch of companies that make essential oil products. Here's the thing: Bravecto, NexGard, Simparica, Cordelia, Advantage, Frontline. They do not repel. They only kill them once they get on your animal. So this is a conversation I had with my mom a few years ago. So my mom, you know if you're one of these people if you have a lot of insurance. If you buy 1 million insurance policies, because just in case you don't want anything to go wrong. I happen to be somebody who has way too much insurance, but so talking to my mom, her dog refused to eat raw food, so we couldn't. That was hard. Oh yeah. So she, every 6 months she calls the office and says, "Hey, can you send home a 6-month supply of Interceptor and Frontline for my dog?" So I did this for a lot of years, and finally I confronted her and said, "Mom, why? Why are you doing this?" I said, "Do you ever see fleas or ticks on your dog?" She goes, "No, I've never seen one, and I don't want to." And that's when the light bulb went on.
Yep.
She thinks it repels.
Yep.
Nope, she just doesn't live in an area where there's fleas and ticks. So her dog had 0 exposure, but it was getting chemicals every single day.
That is the mentality that we see from the majority of people. They
Yeah.
don't want the problem. That's why they're using these
They're buying
chemicals.
insurance.
But that's also because that's what is promoted to the veterinary offices.
Oh, heck yeah.
Because the veterinarians are saying you need to keep your pets on heartworm as well as flea and tick 12 months out of the year.
It is.
And that is absolute BS.
That's right.
It is.
It is
Absolute
a
BS.
major struggle that we have, and we are working very hard. We're working on some things to try to get more holistic vets to work with more of the conventional vets. I'm actually working on it. Where we can try to get that mentality change. It's going to be a very hard upward battle.
Oh, it is.
Well,
But,
it's even trying to get the mentality changed on all of the vaccination things that we keep doing every 3 years. On the label it says, in healthy animals.
Or, yeah,
If
you got
your
administered
dog
to
has
unhealthy.
a
Well-
heart problem, that's not healthy.
That's exactly right.
So we'll talk about that a little bit. So, yes,
Can I ask 3 quick questions now?
Sure.
The essential oils,
remind me, vaccine duration.
the essential oils that you use, do you dilute them, or do you just?
I use products that are kind of like the Wondercide that are
Oh,
already made.
Do something that's already made, yeah.
If you want to make your own, you got to get really well educated in that.
Yeah,
And yes,
that's what
they
I
must
thought.
be diluted.
That's what I thought, okay, and then, my vet has worked with me, my dog came from the south, who was tested negative for heartworm with paperwork that came. Then when I first got her, she was about 2.5. Then we tested her again, still negative. So the way we handle heartworm is that he, on the wellness exam, every year he does the heartworm test. Do you think that is a good approach, or not necessary, or?
Oh yeah, you want to be, if you're not using heartworm preventative, you should actually test 3 to 4 times a year. If you really want to be safe, you should test 3 to 4 times a year.
So you suggest doing heartworm treatment?
No. My dogs don't take heartworm
No.
preventative. They just get tested.
Okay.
So,
I should have it
and
tested.
if you are using heartworm preventative, you still need to check at least once a year. So the way that we recommend heartworm preventative, you have to understand the life cycle of heartworms. There has to be a positive dog somewhere in your neighborhood. So there's a dog that's infected with heartworms in your neighborhood. It's got little baby microflaria swimming around in its bloodstream. The mosquito bites that dog, sucks up a blood meal, takes that little microflaria. They go into the salivary glands of the mosquito, and they have to undergo a couple of changes, and it takes 2 weeks. If the outdoor temperature, day, night, doesn't matter, drops below 57 degrees, that process stops. So for a lot of the year here, that process cannot complete itself in the mosquito because it just gets too cold at night, and so it stops. Your veterinarian is going to say, "Oh, but we can see mosquitoes in January." But they're not carrying heartworms, or at least they're not carrying heartworms that can do anything. So there has to be an infected dog, coyote, fox, whatever, close enough for the mosquito to bite that, and then fly around for 2 weeks with those little guys maturing in there, and then bite your dog. Mosquitoes don't have a very big radius, by the way. most of them it's less than a mile. So they don't have very good ratings. So then it has to bite your dog, and then it takes 6 to 9 months from the time your dog is bitten to the time you'll actually get a positive test. If you're using heartworm preventative, this is kind of one of those things, it ain't preventing nothing. What it's doing is preventing adults from developing. What it's actually doing is killing the babies that have been injected to your dog that are going through that 6-month migration phase through the tissues to end up in the heart. So it's actually killing an exposure that your dog already had. So it's no different than giving a dewormer, for hookworms, roundworms, whatever. Now I was in Nova Scotia speaking, and it's very cold there. We were there at the end of July, and it was like 35 degrees at night. And there was a veterinarian in the audience, very traditional. And I said, hey, do you guys even have heartworms here? And he went, oh. I said, do you sell heartworm preventative? Oh, yes. I said, why? And I said, well, okay, do you recommend that they give heartworm preventative all year round every month? Oh, absolutely. Okay, you don't have heartworms, why are you doing that? Well, for intestinal parasites.